For Global Business Update, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning. Yes, so we got Asia Pacific shares generally still reacting to what everybody's talking about, basically continued tightening monetary policies throughout the world. No big surprises there. The Nikkei down very, very slightly, Hong Kong down a bit. In Australia, I think really what people were looking for was what China's Xi said about the continuing necessity for where the Chinese economy was going. They didn't get any clues about this, but they did get from it that he doesn't think that there's necessarily going to have to be rapid growth in China, only towards greater focus on national self-sufficiency, especially in tech. If you were looking for where they're going with the COVID policy there, which many investors around the world are, no actual change to that in the near future. He also spoke about promoting a healthy online environment and so on, which is to do with regulation. Perhaps more tellingly, the share of Chinese stocks in the benchmark MSCI emerging markets has fallen from 43.2% in October 2020 to 32% in July 2022. And this really, this shift actually shows how what was a no question destination for people's investment is slightly souring, given the fact that the economy there apparently is slowing down, but mostly because of people don't know which way the regulation is going to go in China. But I think the most important takeaway from what President Xi was saying at the Communist committee meeting was that there's no specific end to the zero COVID policy. So that means any outbreaks and they start to shut down. Let's turn our attention to the United States, and it's a big week for earnings. It started off on Friday. The stocks basically on a roller coaster. Again, anything could happen today. Futures are slightly up, and this is all about the Fed's coming rate rises. Bank of America will report after the bell today. Goldman Sachs Tuesday, JP Morgan and Wells Fargo have already reported quite solid results. That was last week. And Morgan Stanley's equity trading revenue disappointed. You have to say, not particularly surprised about that. But also coming up, we've got Netflix, Tesla, IBM, Johnson & Johnson, United Airlines, Verizon, AT&T and Procter & Gamble. So all the biggies actually reporting this week, and we'll be seeing how they're actually going to compete, and also about supply chains, about interest rates, and about rising costs. Right, we turn to the horror show that is the UK government. It performed a big U-turn on corporation tax, as you know. Chancellor was dismissed on Friday. What's going to happen today? The big questions really: has the confidence of the markets been regained? Well, actually, borrowing costs has fallen very, very slightly. Sterling has strengthened very, very slightly. The new chap, the Mr. Hunt, who's coming in as Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, is coming in as Chancellor, is going to make a statement round about lunchtime today, and then will stand up in the House of Commons to make a further statement. Everything is going to be, everything is on the table to be reformed, apart from, I suspect, the cut in national insurance, which has already been sort of agreed as it's been through Parliament. Remember, Jeremy Hunt has no particular experience of running a treasury, and Kwasi Kwarteng is going out as the shortest serving Chancellor on record. So these big unfunded tax cuts are probably out of the window now. What he will be proposing and how he's going to buy time. So we're going to be talking about tax today. Spending cuts will still be talked about in that statement on October the 31st, which is the medium-term spending review, and that will also be accompanied by the Office for Budget Responsibilities marking of the homework and how it's thinking about balancing the books. I thought it was quite telling yesterday, for example, that the chairman of Tesco, which is our biggest supermarket, was on the television yesterday morning, and he said, as far as he was concerned, only Labour Only Labour had a sensible plan for the economy, which is actually quite a big turnaround. And speaking of Tesco, they've warned that rising interest rates, which the governor of the Bank of England has already warned about, are going to hit people. And supermarkets and shops have what he described as a moral responsibility to look after people who are in the real world being impacted by this. So that's my thing all the time. It's all right talking about Westminster, already talking about the Bank of England. How does it actually affect real people? It looks like, here's just a little side issue, UK electric Mini production will be moved from Oxford to China. BMW does insist that Oxford will still remain the centre of Mini manufacture, but the actual putting together of the things may be moving to China. And oil prices finally bounced back very, very slightly in early Asian trading today. The surge came as the strength of the dollar waned very, very slightly, but still it's dependent upon production cuts, what effect they're going to have, and also the growth of China's economy. That's the global picture this morning.
All right, real quickly, what happens to this medium-term framework that Jeremy Hunt, and we know Jeremy Hunt's antecedents, I'm sure a lot of doctors will shrug a little bit when they remember Jeremy Hunt and the British Medical Association debacle then and the doctor strike. So what is going to be new about the fiscal framework? Secondly, what is going to happen to that deficit hole due to tax cut for 50 to 60 billion pounds sterling? What is happening really? Because, yeah, she's put in Jeremy, but what's the deal?
All right, so what we're going to hear about today, as I said, are going to be tax, the tax situation. The actual business about the black hole, I think it looks like, and again, I don't want to predict what he's going to say, but I think all the indications are he'll be talking about that in a fortnight's time. So what he's trying to do, what Jeremy Hunt is trying to do, is to try to buy some time for about a fortnight to try to restore some sort of stability as far as financial markets are concerned. Now, last night I was talking to one of my neighbours who actually is part of this, and two things have naturally emerged. You do not mess about with the bond markets. What the bond markets are actually for, lest we forget this, is that the government can raise, doesn't matter which government it is, can raise a certain amount in tax. The rest of spending has to be borrowed, and the borrowing comes from the bond markets. It has, right since the Napoleonic Wars, you can go back 300 or 400 years in the history of this country, and I'm sure it's exactly the same with you, that the governments have to have the confidence of the bond markets. If they lose those, then they lose credibility. What Jeremy Hunt is trying to do is to try to talk about tax today, and then it's been an extraordinary turn. You can imagine. I'm sure I don't need to go into the reversals and all the rest of it, which have been the political is still. But I mean, how long has Liz Truss got? All this kind of thing. It's all very, very difficult to say right now. But the two fixed dates are today. A talk about tax and there'll be U-turns on that, and then about how that fiscal black hole, and things could have got worse. I mean, we don't know. Things could have got worse. Things have got better. But that will have at least what the markets actually want. And I think this lot, such as those that survive in Westminster of the Truss administration, are realising that they just moved too quickly, and you don't do that. What you do is you've got to have a sensible balancing of the books, which is what the OBR is all about. Why they thought of that shows a naivety which is beyond me, I have to say. And I speak as one who does not believe in higher taxes necessarily boosting economic performance. Don't understand how that happens. Of course, we want to try to attract investment into this country, but that's what we're going to see later on today, I think.
Okay, if Jeremy Hunt's statements in an interview over the weekend is anything to go by, he seems set to dismantle, Kwarteng's emergency budget. He, of course, being a supporter of Rishi Sunak. You said Kwarteng has been the shortest ever chancellor. Well, will Prime Minister Truss, now that Trussonomics is dead, and everybody is laughing at Britain, even the Greek Prime Minister is offering to give ideas in case Britain needs help. The German ambassador to London, everybody is laughing at Liz Truss. She doesn't have the support of business. She doesn't have the support of investors. She doesn't have the support of her cabinet. She doesn't have the support of critical elements in her party. Will she end up as the shortest ever prime minister in the history of Britain? What do you think? And then finally, Xi Jinping at the Great Hall yesterday, was talking about unification of China and Taiwan. He was insistent on COVID, zero COVID policy. Who was he addressing, really? The members of the Communist Party, or he was reacting to the West?
Well, I have to say I was disappointed that there weren't many more details about the COVID thing, which, I mean, of course, the usual saber rattling about Taiwan, and he's not going to welcome outside influence on that. I'm guessing the truth of the matter is that given Russia's experience with Ukraine, China's looking very, very closely at that. And you will notice that those two leaders are not walking in the same kind of lockstep that they were before. As far as COVID's concerned, I happen to feel it's zero COVID is a rather dangerous policy, but he doesn't want to be seen to be turning back on that, because that would be a major sort of trust moment for him, really, wouldn't it? To go back on something which he's been so firm about. So it was relatively disappointing. As far as Liz Truss is concerned, I mean, anything could happen, couldn't it? I personally, as you know, I'm no political analyst, but personally, I wouldn't want to have that job if I didn't feel as though the confidence of the cabinet and the confidence of the financial markets, not so much the confidence perhaps, but the respect, I think it's probably a better word, of the financial markets was out there, and it clearly isn't. So I don't see her surviving that long. But again, don't take my word on this. I'm not a political analyst at all. I'm merely looking at what's going on, and it could change in the next 10 minutes. I mean, that's how crazy things have become.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael Wilson. Now for business updates across the African continent, Rotus Odiri is here. Good morning.
Morning, Doctor. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning to all our viewers. Yeah, Moody's, the ratings agency, is saying it's preparing a review for about 9 Nigerian banks with respect to a possible downgrade. Now, just so that nobody panics here, our banks are well capitalized and they're in a good position. But what Moody's is looking at is for FX exposure with respect to these 9 banks. So they are looking at these particular banks, and they are going to look at a couple metrics here. Long-term deposit ratings, and then the long-term issuer and senior unsecured debt ratings. So one is on the deposit side, the other is on with respect to debts, and particularly FX exposure. So if we take a look at the 9 banks that they are looking at here, Access Bank is there, Zenith Bank, First Bank, UBA, FCMB, GTCO, Union Bank, Fidelity, and Sterling Bank. Now, here's a particular quote from Moody's. So this gets to the crux of the matter here. Moody's decision to place the long-term ratings of 9 Nigerian banks on review for downgrade. So again, it's a review. It has not happened yet. It is a review. Reflects the risk of increasing foreign currency rationing that could compromise the bank's operational ability to meet their foreign currency obligations, as well as the risk arising from a potential material depreciation in the country's foreign exchange rate to the bank's capitalization and asset quality. So again, there's also another quote here where they also mention that the review for downgrade on the long-term ratings of the banks also captures the risk that a potential material depreciation in the country's foreign exchange rate could pose to the bank's capitalization and asset quality. So putting that into context here, looking at the banks, as far as the FX exposure for the 9 banks that they're looking at, 40% of their loan book is, as of December of last year, is as far as FX loans. So if you've got a number of borrowers of which this 40% loan exposure exists, facing a depreciation in the currency, they are earning in Naira and they are paying foreign currency loans in dollars. That, of course, impacts, as far as FX risk is concerned, they will be paying more. So they're looking at the FX exposure of this particular portion of the loan book of these 9 banks and saying, and this is what we talk about when we talk about scenarios and modeling and so on. As a ratings agency, they're just taking a look at, okay, a number of banks have reduced the amount of spending you can spending on debit cards, like, for example, with international exposure. They've sent out notifications and so on and so forth. So if you've got, and they've mentioned, in fact, in the reports, they mentioned oil theft, they mentioned the fact that, there's FX illiquidity and so on and so forth. So how does this affect the loan FX exposure from the loan book of these particular banks. That is what they are putting under review with respect to how that is going to impact the bank. So we'll see what happens with respect to that coming up. But this just again points to the wider narrative of how foreign exchange liquidity not only affecting these banks. I mean, look at the stock market. The majority of the investors on the NGX are domestic. Foreign portfolio investors have reduced compared to domestic because of them being not able to take money out. Aviation and so on and so forth. We move from there to, okay, so for example, this really isn't news, but this kind of is part of what they're talking about. The same day that report came out, Fidelity Bank announced that they're going to be making, I believe it's due today, a $400 million Eurobond payment. They're settling that Eurobond. I think that was issued 2017 or 2018 or so. So if you think about this payment, this settlement now, in terms of where the Naira is today versus where it was 5 years ago, it's probably going to be a more expensive payment for the bank. So this is kind of in line with what they're talking about. But again, our banks are healthy. They're making their payments. It's just a matter of the expense compared to where things were a few years ago. And the borrowers who are in their loan book FX exposure, their ability to be able to make those payments back. We move from there to the Global Innovation Index. Nigeria lagging her peers. This is from the World Intellectual Property Organization, I believe, the WIPO, putting this out. So if you take a look at the rankings, I think Nigeria is 114th. So looking at the top 10 now, only Mauritius is in the top 50. South Africa is in the top 70 at number 61. As far as the top 100, Botswana, Kenya, Ghana, Namibia, Senegal. And then you've got the United Republic, Tanzania, Rwanda, Madagascar, Zimbabwe, Cote d'Ivoire, and top 110. And then there you've got Nigeria at 114. If you look at the different metrics that they used, so business sophistication, Nigeria 69th. Creative output, Nigeria 97th. Human capital and research, 109th. Infrastructure, 112th. Institutions, 112th. Knowledge and technology outputs, 123rd. Market sophistication, 126th. So, you know, there's a lot of ground that needs to be covered with respect to where Nigeria is. You put all this together and you ask yourself, for the presidential candidates that are looking to lead this country in the future, how do you hope to improve innovation? How do you hope to improve the FX picture? There's a debate that's going on the 15th of November. The NEDG, the Nigeria Elections Debate Group, and the Nigerian Economic Summit Group. They haven't mentioned which particular candidates will be participating, but this is a debate specifically on economic policy, which is going to happen on the 15th of November. We'll see who participates, but that has to happen. Just going back to where we were on the performance of the nations, which is the kind of thing you throw to a candidate. In the lower middle income group, 14 economies performed below expectation for their level of development, including sub-Saharan economies of Cote d'Ivoire, Nigeria, Zambia, Cameroon, and so on. So lots of ground to cover. Are we innovative enough? That's the question.
Obviously, we are not.
We are not.
And why are we not innovative enough?
Because you don't have young people in leadership.
That's number one. Number two, because we don't have forthright leadership, vision, purposeful leadership that thinks of the future, that wants to accelerate development. We don't have leadership that looks and say, what do I want to do in STEM? These candidates, what's their plan for STEM in the next 10 years? Science, technology, engineering, and math.
I was about to ask if they know what STEM stands for before
You
said it.
know, how many chips, microchips do they want to produce? Look at Taiwan leading the way in technology now. Chip is the future, semiconductors. How do they want to produce these things? You're talking about Nigeria. We're having liquidity crisis. It's obvious. Why? Corruption, crude oil theft.
Aging infrastructure.
Let me shock you, Rotus.
Yeah.
In 1980, Nigeria collected $24 billion in crude oil revenue. Are we collecting up to that today?
No, we are not.
So what we are collecting in crude oil revenue 40 years ago is even better than what we have now. That's to show you the extent of the theft. You see, it's only in Nigeria that the thieves are now richer than the owners. Formerly, the owner used to be very rich. A thief was still little. But now the thief has stolen so much, they are richer. And the NNPC is not remitting she to FAC, to Federation Accounts. NNPC is not remitting she. NNPC is not remitting she. We are living based on the... So how are we going to have forex crisis? How are we going to have liquidity crisis? At the same time, we are overdriving on ways and means because there's no money actually. Why? We can't go to the bond market.
Because it's more expensive.
It's more expensive. That's why 2023 must matter. Leaders must tell us how they're going to solve this problem, and they must attend our ESG debate. I beg them, please.
Well, you said the Nigeria Election Debates Group and also the Nigeria Economic Summit Group have not named the persons who will be invited. The focus is the economy. I think it's important that all the 18 presidential candidates are invited and they are given equal opportunity. You recall Showore's excitement when he was invited to a recent debate organized by ICANN, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, that look, you must give everybody an equal level playing field.
Yeah.
And since this is the election debates group, I think it's important that everyone is given a chance. And the economy is very important.
Oh, yes.
As we have seen in Britain, where Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng, flunked economics 101 and threw, almost the whole of Europe into panic.
Yeah.
So here, it is even more important now than ever. So I hope the candidates will give themselves the opportunity. We make use of the opportunity to further engage with that constituency and Nigerians in general, since the media is actively involved in the planning model that they have published. So we'd like to hear from the candidates again and again. Number two, you are quoting Moody's, and then the report on innovation.
Yep.
This is in plain sight. These are plain sight, commonsensical, observable points that they have made. They are not telling us anything that is coming to us as a surprise.
Right.
Peter F. Drucker, I think he was the one they told us when we were doing innovation, in business school. Yeah, Peter F. Drucker was talking about innovation with regard to entrepreneurship. Okay, they were talking about innovation, ingenuity, right? And invention. And the whole argument is that if you don't innovate, you stagnate.
Yes.
And Peter Drucker was saying, look, the difference is between what is, where you are, and what is possible.
Right.
The extent to which you can go. Nigeria looks like it's stagnated on many fronts. The education sector is
comatose.
sick.
Yeah.
The economy is problematic. So what do you expect? We really, are a country of great potentials, we're not where we're supposed to be.
Yeah.
And that is why, it is important that all of us continue to think constantly. Because if you don't innovate, you die. If you don't reinvent yourself in this age of constant change, you lose out in the global competitiveness space. Thank you very much, Lotus.
Thank you.